who is going to be replaced first by AI? Is it designers, is it engineers, or is it PMs?
The best product managers have taste. AI can't replace taste, and AI can't replace intuition.
My intuition is that this ratio of PM to engineers that companies use will shift dramatically because it will just be simpler to build and you will have less engineers per product person.
Oh my God, Dios mío, this is, oh my God, Dios mío.
Welcome to Hotfix. Our guest today is Trisha Price. Trisha is CPO at Pendo, a software experience platform that empowers product managers to create impact. In today's episode, we talked about the role of AI in the future of product management. We explored why product managers might actually be among the last roles replaced by AI. Trisha also shared her failure story where her team at Pendo faced challenges when developing an AI retention model and the difficulties of designing user experiences around machine learning insights. And finally, we dove into a provocative debate about whether a distinct product strategy actually exists or if it's just an extension of the overall company strategy. Welcome to the show, Trisha.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Welcome. Really excited to have you today. And let me jump right at it. So with Pendo, you're working on changing how product management is done using AI. Would you mind talking about that a little bit more?
Sure. At Pendo, we are a software experience platform. This is a platform for product managers to use quantitative, qualitative, and visual data all put together to help them really drive business outcomes that matter for their companies, right? It's not about just how to help you ship a feature faster, but it's how do you drive retention in your product? How do you improve free to paid conversion? And so, as you can imagine, with this broad set of qual and visual data of replays, it's a lot of information. And for product managers, more information is not always better. It can just cause us to get bogged down. And so we're really utilizing AI to help product managers find signal from the noise and to really know what to focus on to drive these business outcomes.
That makes a lot of sense. And so something I've seen with teams that I've been running is that product managers that have this good understanding of business metrics usually excel at the position, right? So if they understand how to drive retention, how to drive conversion, it really helps them. What I found is that historically, very good developers or someone that has already been working with software would have been promoted to a product management position and then they struggled. Is Pendo helping people like that also better understand this connection between what they are building and how it actually drives outcomes?
Yeah, for us internally at Pendo with our product managers, most of the very senior product leaders, VP and above, have had a career and opportunity and exposure to be accountable to the business metrics that you're talking about. One was a CEO before, one has significant experience as a growth product leader with true accountability to revenue numbers and free to paid conversion numbers, as well as retention numbers. So those leaders help educate their teams underneath them. Because to your point, like you're a first-time product manager, you don't understand all of these metrics. But if your leader does, and your leader sets up clear scorecards and communication, and then if you set up an operating model and a cadence where these outcomes are constantly reviewed, that really helps people get educated. We don't just out of the gate expect them to know that for sure.
So Stefan and I recently had a discussion about who is going to be replaced first by AI. Is it designers, is it engineers, or is it PMs? It still feels like that if we look at the day-to-day tasks, that the tasks the product managers do are the most messiest ones compared to the other functions, especially because they have to deal probably more with people and with different stakeholders, and all of these different stakeholders are different. And also they have to deal with all of these signals. Signals can come from many, many different places. What is your answer, or what is Pendo's answer to all of the other signals that PMs need to analyze in order to get to a decision or discover a problem?
Yeah. So first, like to your hot take on AI and impact to roles, I think if you go through those buckets, right? Engineers, do we maybe need less of them? Do we maybe need less of the junior level folks? Probably, likely with AI. But if you're a 10x engineer who can think about a really hard problem and think about how to break it down into an architecture, I'm not so sure AI is going to solve that for us, right? And I'm going to say the same thing about the other roles that you talked about. As a designer, do I believe that some of these prototyping tools, I watched my team do some things with Bolt recently that was so cool, and their ability to take an idea and generate. Do I think that impacts the design world? I do. But I think when you have designers who really understand your application and your users and can build incredible experiences and utilize these AI tools, those people are still wildly valuable. Now, to get to your real question about product management, I was at MTPCon in London last week, and I was at the leadership forum, and Megan Quinn spoke, and Megan is just incredible. And one of the things Megan said was the best product managers have taste. And I loved her term taste and how AI can't replace taste. And to your question, when it comes to taste, it's a little bit of intuition, it's a little bit of being opinionated, but a lot of that is based on your personal experience as well as all of the signal and information that's coming at you. But at the end of the day, AI can't replace taste, and AI can't replace intuition, and AI can't replace building your customers' confidence in your roadmap and having a two-way conversation where you listen and learn about a customer's objectives and what they're trying to achieve, and then translate that into an idea. Now, can you get from idea 1 and 2 to a prototype and validating those at scale, utilizing AI faster? Heck yeah. Does that require less of us? Maybe, probably. So I think the whole world of PMs is changing with these tools of AI, but the best folks who have that intuition, who have that, as Megan called it, I don't think AI takes its place.
What would also speak, in my opinion, for the fact that PMs are going to be replaced last is, yes, there are junior designers. Yes, there are junior engineers. There's average engineers that can be replaced. But in my opinion, there cannot be a junior product manager. I think a product manager can only work how a product manager should work if they're being seen as a trusted partner in the business. And if other stakeholders trust the product manager that they can take better decisions than themselves, is very hard if you are someone who just recently graduated, for example.
You can be a product owner, and we might call product owners product managers as they move up in their maturity scale. I've done that many places I've worked where my junior PMs are really product owners, but we've called them product managers because they want exposure. They want to work for these other product managers so that they learn that intuition, so that they learn those business outcomes that we're trying to drive, and they can become a PM. And I think that that's okay and reasonable. Those types of roles might become a little more irrelevant with AI and where we're going. But to your point, a true product manager who's building trust, who's dealing with multiple stakeholders and making decisions every single day, probably going to be here for a while.
Because like with all these AI tools that are coming up, like Cursor or like design tools, it now also just becomes a lot easier to build stuff, right? And so I think it will become even more, I think my intuition is that this ratio of PM to engineers that companies use will shift dramatically because it will just be simpler to build and you will have less engineers per product person. So I've seen companies now that have like a 1-1-1 split in teams, one engineer, one designer, one product manager, and that's the entire team working on a product. And that is so interesting, right? If you talk to VCs or someone, they would say, oh no, you would need a 5-to-1 ratio, 6-to-1 ratio to be efficient or whatnot. But I think this is in the past. I believe this makes product managers' jobs very, very safe, actually.
I agree with you. It makes them safe. And I do think the ratios change depending on where you are in maturity cycle of your product too. I do believe a tool like Cursor can be incredibly helpful even on a legacy mature application. But when you talk to the VCs and you or even when you start to look at some of these companies that you're talking about that are starting up now with 1 ratios, it's wildly different if you're trying to go from 0 to product market fit versus if you're trying to go from product market fit to global domination and scale, or you're trying to go from you're already at scale and you just don't want to lose customers and you're driving retention and churn, right? And then you're trying to go from 0 to 1 at the same time. I think the ratios are going to look different. And I do absolutely believe AI tools help in both scenarios, but I don't think they automatically take you in the mature scenario to 1 to 1. I just don't think we're there yet. I think that's a long ways away, actually.
Yep. Makes sense. So, Trisha, let's move on to the heart of our podcast, which is our failure story. You told us that you are currently working or were working on a new machine learning or AI feature at Pendo, and you still haven't figured out a good user experience for that feature. Can you take us through what happened?
Yeah. So I love this part of your show and the fact that we get to tell a story that we failed, because it's so common for all of us to either talk about new thought leadership or some of the great achievements we've had. And we all learn from our failures and we all make them. So this is definitely a place that I feel like I failed and I feel like we as a team failed. And to your point, we had started on this project many years ago. We had more than 1 to 1 to 1 ratios on it. So we've spent money. And the story here is with Pendo data, we have all this usage analytics. We have all this product analytics. We know where everybody's clicking, what they're doing. And we kind of also generally know the outcome of those people, meaning we know if they stopped coming back to the product or they continued to come to the product. And so we had this idea, like there is some amazing data in here. We could use our machine learning team to really figure out what drives user retention. Okay, so if you accomplish X or you use feature Y, you never leave the product. Now, what product manager doesn't want to know that, right? Pretty awesome. So we started working on building this model. We did it on Pendo internal data. We had design partners. We worked with them and we started to see some promising results. We also saw some like somewhat boring results, right? Like, oh, if they go to the settings page and it's like, yeah, no kidding. If people are coming to the settings page regularly, they're probably an administrator of the product and they probably don't leave. So there was definitely some playing with the model and trying to get the model to produce useful results. But we saw some pretty promising things pretty early in the data. So then it's like, okay, let's build some designs. Let's get some design partners. Let's get this in front of users. Let's do discovery and figure out how do we create an amazing experience around this data. And so we started on the journey. We got it wrong. We got it wrong. We got it wrong. And we changed product managers on it. We brought in new designers. We had Todd, our CEO, who's one of the best product people in the industry, pushing and participating and brainstorming on it. We said, let's bring everybody together to headquarters and let's go get on the whiteboard. And we still just couldn't get it right. Eventually, we got to a point where we did release the feature. We did that this last pandemonium, so October, but the feature still doesn't have amazing adoption. And it's really interesting because every product manager I speak to says the same thing, which is like, I want to know the answer to this. But yet some combination of the model that we've produced or the user experience we've created has fallen short. And it really, it's got some interesting insights. People see them and they like them. But then the other thing is like, if they go back and look a month later, are the insights wildly different? So once they saw them once, it's kind of like, okay, the moment's over. Or if you try to make the model react differently and constantly bring new insights to people, then they don't really believe them. Like, well, how could something wildly different be driving retention than a month ago? So again, like what does good look like for this feature is also really, really hard. And so we just haven't quite been able to nail that and figure it out.
I would want to start with an easy question, which is, so what is the Pendo feature that drives retention. So what is the one feature customers need to use in Pendo to stay? What is your model saying?
So I'm going to give you a different answer based on our product area. So session replay is a little bit different than analytics, which is a little bit different than guides, right? From an analytics feature, it really does come down to creating shared dashboards. And you would think like, no, it's the people who come back to your Data Explorer feature and get really deep over and over again, but it's not. It's when you create shared dashboards, because now the whole product team and or company are starting to operate off of that data. And the data is leveling up to the overall product operating model that the team or the company has, and they're making decisions on that, and they're using it as their scorecard or their OKR mechanism. That is really the retention moment for customers for Pendo Analytics, for sure.
So just for listeners to understand, the feature is about finding the activation point that usually leads to a longer retention.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
And for session replay, it's a little bit different, right? For session replay, it's not about watching sessions. Nobody wants to come watch sessions. We are busy people. We want to watch the right session, and we're going to come back to the product over and over again if you're able to serve up sessions for me that actually help me solve the problem I came in there to solve. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, yeah. The problem that you're mentioning, or a very real life observation that you're mentioning, that these activation points are different for most probably different features, for different cohorts using the product, for different user personas using the product. Is that the thing that also makes it hard to design a good user experience?
It is, and we've done things, right? Like, okay, when you come in, you can filter your insights based on the product area that you're interested in, right? So if I come in and I say, hi, I'm the session replay product manager, only show me insights about session replay, you can absolutely do that in the interface.
When you say retention, right? Because I think like one hard thing about retention is actually defining what is a retained user, right? Is it a user that is staying beyond the average lifetime? Is it a user that stays indefinitely? Then it's really hard to have high retention, because indefinitely is a really long time. So how does that work? So do the users have to like set up what retention means for their company before it actually works, or how does
it's interesting you say that. We started with a 90-day retention model, and then we moved to a 30-day retention model. We have not yet gotten to the point, and that could also be part of why we've had trouble knocking this one out of the park. It's really hard for us to build a model that is flexible based on a bunch of configurations that you tell me. So we went with a 30-day and a 90-day based on our research to kind of hit the different kinds of companies and where it would be relevant. But that could be why, like, is 30 and 90 the right answer for enough people? Maybe that's why it is a hard challenge to figure out how to have a model that scales for every single subscription and every single customer if we allow them to all pick what matters most to them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? And then if you make it too configurable, it's just too hard to use, right? If you need like 15 steps to set it up before it gives you an answer, it's just not interesting. Then you can just look at cohorts yourself and figure it out.
The things that we're all talking about. The whole point of an insight is that you don't have to go figure it out, that Pendo just tells you this is what you should go pay attention to. You can already go find all those answers in Pendo by running reports and doing queries.
And I can understand that it is really hard to design this one user experience that is one size fits all.
Yeah.
So another question I have is like, how do you react, right? You find out that this is just not going off, like it doesn't work. You are bringing in all these people, you're doing things at your headquarters. As a product leader, what are you doing then? So how are you reacting to this, and how are you moving on from here, or how have you reacted in the last couple of months to this result?
Freak out on people. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I have my moments. I'm a human and I'm under pressure to deliver. And look, this is really hard. There's been moments where I have expressed frustration at the team, to the team, that we need to deliver, or we need to stop spending money on this and we need to kill the project. And then there's moments where I'm like, these are great people. And if it was that easy, it's like just slapping the table isn't going to do anything. These are not lazy people who are not trying hard. So then you try to get creative. To your point, all the things, step one's ask the hard questions and make sure that you've got the right people and the right resources who have the capability to solve the problem. If you have that and you've changed product managers or designers and gotten the right people on the team and you're still not delivering, then it's how do we as leaders help them? To your point, bring them to headquarters. Let's get on the whiteboard. How do we help? Okay. Sometimes it's more time. We've tried that too. And then at some point you have to say, like, is this problem unsolvable in the way we're thinking about it? And do we just need to kill the project and try a different thing? And one of the things we've also been thinking about is a churn model, which is different than a retention model, might be an easier model to consume the results of and an experience to build around. And so then you start to think about other similar solutions that could provide value, but not in the exact same way. And that's really where we are right now.
Yeah, because I think like it resonated so much with me when you said that also other product managers want to know that which feature is the feature that customers use that make them retain, right? So, and I believe this on the spot, and I think therefore it's just so much harder to kill an idea where you are like 100% sure there is a problem, the market is there, people seem to need it, but we can't figure out the solution, right? It's so much easier to kill a feature where you are, okay, we are never really sure if this
people
works.
People don't like it. They don't care about it. Yeah. Then you're like, kill it. That's easy. Yeah. But that's not what this was.
So where are you now with the features? What are the ideas now? Where do you want to go, or what is the state of it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things happening. It is in GA. It's a feature our customers can use. We did not try to charge separately for this feature. So this wasn't a feature that, even though it's good but not great, it's not a killer feature yet, like people have a barrier to use it or try it or for us to continue to improve on it. So it's a feature and it's there. Some of our customers are getting real value from it. We are continuing to iterate on it with other additional models that'll help drive and refine better results and continuing to refine the interface. But in parallel, we're also starting to think about other similar problems like churn and thinking about them in context of what was such a challenge here and why it took us a long time, and tried to pivot a bit and get other value out to customers that we know we can do easier. I'll use that term with air quotes.
Yeah, I think that is also a question I would answer. Which features make customers churn? So if they use it, which customers churn if they use a feature, so I know what to delete out of the product.
Also, even which customers are probable to churn based on the usage of your product.
That is very interesting.
That's one that we're working on too, which is like, hey, we have all of your usage, you're using Pendo, go pay attention to these customers. And it's not always just low usage, it could be based on other metadata fields as well.
I think this is something that for sure has a market, right? So every company I worked at, we built something like this ourselves, like using data out of tools like Pendo, and then build something in Salesforce where we have like churn indicators on every customer, where there's 5 green lights, and then if there's 5 red lights, the account manager calls them and tries to mitigate the potential churn. So I think this is definitely something that makes a lot of sense.
We do this at Pendo. We extract the Pendo data, and then our data science team that works in finance goes and builds a customer health model. And then we actually put the red, yellow, green in Salesforce by the account in terms of customer health from red, yellow, green. And we do that ourselves. So trying to automate some of that and productize some of that for our customers is something we're definitely thinking about.
Yeah, no, and I think then your expertise there will definitely be helpful, because I have always found these churn score discussions very esoteric. Like sometimes there's so many different functions trying to come up with the wildest ideas of what causes churns. And then those churn scores become so complex and so elusive that in the end, it is not as clear anymore if a red light really means churn, or it's just a bunch of metrics playing into a score that then turns a light green or red without the clear understanding if this is the right way to calculate like a churn risk.
And it's interesting because you can have customers who have great usage of your product and they can churn.
Yeah.
Right? Because do they have is the use of their product actually driving value? Do you have executive and buyer C-suite buy-in? Because users aren't always the buyer. It is a complex thing to get customer health, and customer usage is an important part of customer health, or product usage is an important part of customer health, but it's not the only thing, to your point.
And what would interest me there as well is like, how do you actually, or not how, but do you actually use this aggregated knowledge of what works and doesn't work in product? Because at Pendo, with like all like indices, like all the data points within all customers, there must be this huge amount of understanding of which things generally work or don't work in, I don't know, for example, B2B SaaS in industry 1 or consumer tech in industry B. So is there a way to aggregate this and tell these are things that work in general in software, you should or shouldn't do that?
We do have benchmarks that we provide, and we do embed them into our product at Pendo, as well as provide just industry benchmarks for our customers and for the industry to understand. So those are less about insights, because insights really are subscription/customer specific, and they have customer specific models, but we certainly do put together benchmarking data.
Because I think what would be interesting, right, is like if you could tell me, I don't know, I somehow link this to a Notion doc where I describe a feature, a business case, whatever, and then based on a lot of data points within Pendo, it just tells me you shouldn't do that. That will not work. We have seen this not work 100 out of 100 times in similar companies. Don't build that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I think it's some of that as 100 other companies, but it's also like coming back to our original conversation about why AI can't replace product managers. Like, does the system really know if this feature is going to be successful or not because of what's happened at other customers? I don't know. Like some of that is a little bit of intuition, and it's your quant and your qual data together, and it's where you're trying to go, not just where have you been. And if you're trying to move up to the enterprise, or you're trying to, move to a new geography, like hard to know if the AI insight across industry benchmarks is really going to be right or not.
That makes a lot
But
of
I
sense.
do think it can become your product manager agent friend and help you.
I think what it could also influence are price negotiations after a POC. Because when you see that certain people who are doing certain actions during creating a POC in a SaaS tool, and they're very engaged, and suddenly in the price negotiation, for example, they act as if they would not be interested, then you might have a better position to negotiate then.
Yeah, that's true.
Amazing. Thanks so much for the failure story. I think it was very insightful, and I certainly could learn a lot already, and I hope our listeners can as well. So I want to move us to the spicy part of the podcast, which is like our provocative thought corner. In a previous conversation, you said there is no such thing as product strategy. There's company strategy. Would you mind just talking us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. And what I mean here is that your product strategy can't be disconnected from your company strategy. I'm going to caveat and talk about this, that there are different kinds of companies, right? If you're a product SaaS company, then your product strategy is your company strategy, right? What you build and the outcomes you're driving have to be what the company's strategy is. If the company's strategy is to increase revenue through selling more product to existing happy customers, then your product strategy better be to build new product and new modules that you sell to your existing happy customers. Well, you also better make sure you have existing happy customers to sell them to, right? So, okay, then does that flow into a very specific product investment allocation and a roadmap? Absolutely. But is that a product strategy or is that a company strategy, right? Now, if you're at a company that is moving to a product team and having product leaders and product management approach, but the core thing you're selling is not the technology is the delivery mechanism for how your users use it. For example, I'll take a bank, right? A bank's company strategy is different than its product strategy. and it's technology product strategy around building online banking or better user portals or being able to bring together the small business technology portal interface to the consumer one. That is a product strategy that makes sense and it should and must layer up to the company strategy, but they're not one and the same because that's a different kind of business than someone like Pendo who's actually selling our product.
I still think a product strategy should exist to interpret what the company strategy means for the product team. Because very often there's, I think, irrelevant points from the company strategy which do not have to be picked up by the product team. For example, if the company strategy is we need to differentiate, and even though it's a very big item on the company strategy, it doesn't have to directly relate into building new features for the product team. And therefore, I think that for this interpretation of what does the company strategy mean for the product team, a product strategy still can make sense.
I agree that there can be initiatives within the company that make a company successful that may or may not require work from product. If my product is not differentiated enough from the competition, I can hope my product marketing team does a wonderful job of creating a differentiated message. But if the product's really not different, shouldn't you just innovate and make it different? If you already did that work and yet the messaging is exactly the same, you could be right. But if you're just like your competition, you're just like your competition. And if you're just hoping that you've got an amazing marketing team to differentiate you, good luck.
Yeah, it depends on what the problem is. If your product is already differentiated, but your message is not, which can happen, that maybe it's just your competition is selling themselves higher than or better than what they actually are. And that suddenly makes them appear as if they would be the same as your company, even though you're already further than them.
Yeah, that can happen. But most of the time when you're not differentiated from your competition, it's because you're actually not differentiated from your competition. Because if it's that easy and they're that different, your product marketing team's probably not just sitting around like, cool, let's copy and do the same messaging as these other guys. So I think most of the time that happens because product team is sort of doing this move, which is like, we're busy and we don't want to say no to anything and we can't reprioritize. So product marketing, go fix this problem. I mean, it's the same thing with sales enablement. Like you can say, hey, we need to be able to scale selling and we need to enable our sellers. And so that's sales enablement. What the heck does product have to do with it? But if your product is so daggone hard for sellers to understand and consume and go sell, maybe you should look in the mirror and think about like, what is so hard about my product that sales enablement's doing like gymnastics at the Olympic level to try to figure out how to bring sellers on board.
Yeah, and I believe that what I've seen is like the more sales enablement the company need and the more sales engineer a company need, the harder they have it to sell in the end as well, because that just means their product is usually just so hard. And if someone working at your company doesn't get the product, the chance of a user getting the product is infinitely higher. So like someone at your company that can select a product manager is probably better equipped than the user that can't select a product manager. So if you need hours and hours of sales enablement for every feature, you're probably not doing a great job at building those features in a way that they are easy to use.
And you know who it's even harder for than your users if it's hard? For your users' boss's boss's boss who has to go tell the CFO why it's valuable. So that's why, like, and I don't, of course I realize there are absolutely scenarios and times where one particular team should focus on something and not every team in the company has to focus on everything all the time. But at the end of the day, if the product is what you're selling and it's not differentiating from competition, or your win rates are too low, or you're struggling with growth, you can fix those other things and they will help improve those metrics. But you and the product should also be fundamentally questioning yourself and questioning the product as to why it is the way it is. And it may be faster to change messaging than it is to change the product. So you may want to change messaging, and while you're making an investment to make the product continue to improve. But I think when we as product leaders sort of do the duck and dive and sort of escape what it is from a company strategy or a company metric or a company outcome that is to be improved to drive company success and hope that the other teams around us solve it, I don't think those are the best companies who really win and outpace the competition and become sort of that category of one.
That actually brings me to a different question. So generally, so Pendo is a very innovative company and you're innovating a lot. How do you generally, or do you have an approach on how to decide how much you spend on innovation and how much you spend on optimization of what you currently have?
Yeah. I do not believe in standardizing percentages. I do not believe in saying, like, as a company like Pendo, 20% of our R&D investment should be at some innovative thing. Like, what innovative thing? And maybe it should be 50% if it's that good idea, or maybe it should be 2 if you're still experimenting and we're not sure how we're going to deliver. So to me, I don't like sort of standard answers to these things. It depends on what is the outcome we're trying to drive as a company and what are the ideas. Like, for example, obviously AI and agents are everywhere right now. So we, as a product company who delivers a product to people who help make software experiences great, probably need to be investing in some sort of innovation that helps people build these agents and understand their usage, right? The same way we help you today understand who clicked where and build you a path or a funnel and see where drop-offs are. Don't you want to see the same thing about your agents? What was the intention of what they were trying to do? So that is a place we absolutely need to be investing and innovating right now. What percentage of our investment should go to that? Well, it depends. How good is phase 1? How good is the beta? When do you double down? Like, if you go back a couple of years ago when we started to build Session Replay, we time boxed and resource boxed until we had something we were confident in. When we were far enough along in our beta where people were willing to pay, they were using the product, they were getting value out of the product, double down on that team. Go give it 2 teams, go give it 3 teams. Let's accelerate. Let's get revenue and get outcomes for this thing. But you got to start small, build confidence, and then double down.
That makes a lot of sense. One more question for the product strategy take, because now in like, I don't know, I've now been in like this B2B SaaS scale up game for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, working in different like scale up series ABC. And so often I have seen that there was simply no company strategy. And what I mean with this is company strategy was, we need to have an ARR number this high to raise our next round, go make it happen. And it is really hard to say our product strategy now needs to reflect that, because obviously everyone in the company already knows we want to make more money. So there's not a lot of...
That's not a company strategy, by the way, an ARR number. Yeah.
So how should a product leader react if they are in a situation like this? And I believe many are in the situation. How does this make sense then? Where does the product strategy come from?
Option 1, leave. No, I'm just kidding. I am fortunate enough that I've worked at companies with an amazing CEO and an amazing C-suite and a clear company strategy. I don't have a lot of experience in that, but I will tell you what we've done well in terms of how together we build our company strategy is, especially Todd believes in a very clear cadence. The C-suite does 2 days of planning each quarter, and then that comes followed by ELT level planning for a day after those 2 days, where the things cascade and we get everyone aligned, and we sometimes change because the next level down has great ideas and can help flesh things out. And then that drives what our OKRs are for the quarter. Some of those meetings, at least a year, are long range planning. What's the next big bets? What are the big rocks? Not all of them are, because you got to execute. You can't just keep long range planning. I would answer that with a clear commitment from the entire C-suite needs to come together on spending the time to drive long range planning and short range planning and driving that into some sort of scorecarding, OKR type work that can be cascaded down to align the company around it.
And out of curiosity, when you meet with the C-level, what's the output after these 2 days? Is it metrics that you want to move, or is it segments?
It's OKRs. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And we usually come up with the objective and we work with the executive team to come up with the actual key results and measurements, because you really need to bring that next level in to make sure you're getting that you're stretching, but not unrealistically stretching to get the actual measurement of them right.
Okay. Thank you so much. Also very insightful. And I think with that, I would want to thank you now, because I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And that's the best indicator that I hope everyone else listening here enjoyed it as much. Thanks so much for coming on. And for all our listeners, please subscribe and check into the podcast once again in 2 weeks.